Okay, thank you. My name is Carolyn Bull. I'm the acting head of the National Security College at the ANU, and it's a great pleasure for me to welcome you here today. I won't speak for very long, but I would like to do an acknowledgement of country before we get started. I'm going to do that in Gamilaroi language, which is the language of my mother's family up in northwest New South Wales. Yama Ningdayu, Gulbiai. Maranyani Nanawal Nambri Winingalana. Dawuniani Nanawal Nambri Winingalana. Wayamaniani Nanawal Nambri Winingalana. Hello to you all and welcome. We pay respects to the Ngunnawal and Ngambri ancestors. We pay respects to the Ngunnawal and Ngambri country. We pay respects to the Ngunnawal and Ngambri elders. One day I hope I can do a bit more of a sophisticated acknowledgement of country. As we acknowledge this country that we meet on today, I'd also like to acknowledge the very rich and enduring ties between this land and those that unite the Indian Ocean. And I'd like to welcome distinguished members of the Diplomatic Corps who are representing those lands here today. I would like to welcome Assistant Minister for Foreign Affairs, the Honourable Tim Watts, who will make some remarks soon. And of course to welcome our special guest of honour today, Darshana Barua, who is a Fellow of the Southeast Asia Program at the Carnegie Endowment, who will be introducing the Carnegie's Indian Ocean Initiative map that we're all excited to learn more about today. That will give us, I am confident, a much greater understanding in a very unique, comprehensive and creative way of the geostrategic importance of the Indian Ocean region. So without further ado, I'd like to hand to Assistant Minister Watts to make some opening remarks.
Well, good morning, and thank you for that wonderful acknowledgement of country, Dr. Bull. And let me join you in sharing and acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet, the Ngunnawal and the Ngambri peoples of the Canberra areas, and pay my respects to elders past and present, and like all members of the Albanese Labor government, recommit myself to the full implementation of the Uluru Statement from the Heart, Voice, Treaty and Truth. Thank you to our hosts here this morning, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and the Australian National University's National Security College. As Australia's Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, has said, we live in the most challenging strategic circumstances of the post-war period. The world faces complex challenges. Strategic competition is increasing, and domains that were previously considered to be largely separate, economic, diplomatic, strategic, military, are rapidly converging. We've seen from Russia's illegal and immoral invasion of Ukraine that peace is not guaranteed and it's becoming harder to maintain. And we know that there are real fragilities in the global economy, driving inflation and fears of recession. We know that the spectre of climate change looms large. Indian Ocean states will need to work together to mitigate the impacts of these challenges and to contribute to global solutions. Australia has an obvious interest in the Indian Ocean. We have the region's longest Indian Ocean coastline, as well as its largest search and rescue zone. We have the largest exclusive economic zone in the Indian Ocean, over 6.3 million square kilometres. And Australia is committed to playing a leading role in managing the opportunities and the challenges in the region over the coming decades. The Indian Ocean Strategic Map will be an important tool for policymaking and for cooperation. The foundation of good policymaking is understanding, and understanding requires good data. And the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace has developed an interactive tool that helps us to understand what is happening in the Indian Ocean more succinctly and in greater depth. The map already included important geographic and economic information about Indian Ocean nations. Phase 2 of this map, which I'm proud the Australian government has supported, has added important data streams such as population density, conventional arms flows and liquid energy shipments. The map shows the huge volume of trade that passes through the region and its critical shipping lanes, accounting for over 1/3 of the world's bulk cargo export traffic and 2/3 of the world's oil shipments. And the map presents this information in an accessible way so that governments, multilateral institutions, think tanks, businesses, NGOs, or members of the public can take the information and use it to put forward ideas to address the challenges that we collectively face. This information will be the foundation for good policy making, so we know how to seize the opportunities of our region, whether that is in trade, investment, technology, migration, education, or defence. The Indian Ocean Strategic Map will also help us to cooperate more closely, can improve our cooperation in practice. For example, visualising the patchwork of interlocking maritime search and rescue areas can assist in rescue coordination and reinforces our commitment to a safe and secure Indian Ocean. But it can also be a tool to deepen our ties and to bring us closer together. It displays maritime boundaries and maritime zones as not just a marker of where our countries end, but importantly, where our relationships as neighbours begin. Australia is very aware of the importance of our relationships. We're listening to the region, and we're asking all countries, no matter how large or small, to be a part of shaping the region that they want. We welcome the opportunity to host Prime Minister Modi in May for a very successful visit, which underscored the deep links between our countries. And you only had to be there in the audience on that extraordinary night to feel the passion in that relationship at the present moment. And I appreciated the frank and varied conversations that I have had during my visits through the Indian Ocean region in the last 12 months. Most recently in the last month, just in the last month, to Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, India, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. These conversations help us to shape a region that is peaceful and predictable, where the countries and peoples of the region can cooperate, trade, and thrive, where internationally agreed rules and norms prevail over the exercise of power, and where no country needs to be held hostage to circumstance. Foreign Minister Wong emphasises our agency, even in these challenging strategic circumstances, which we see through the growing and evolving global and regional architecture, including groups like the Quad, which, working alongside existing institutions, give more choices to countries in the region through a positive and practical agenda for the Indo-Pacific. And I'm delighted that Australia will host the Indian Ocean Conference in 2024 in consultation with the India Foundation. I attended the 2023 Indian Ocean Conference in Bangladesh and enjoyed being part of a lively conversation between regional leaders. The map that Carnegie is launching today shows us that there are better, more productive ways to view the Indian Ocean than simply through the prism of great power rivalry. But this doesn't mean we should be complacent about the risks that we all face. Disinformation, coercive trade measures, and the reshaping of international rules, standards and norms are all challenges that encroach on the ability of countries to exercise their own agency and their rights and entitlements under international law, including UNCLOS. Russia's invasion of Ukraine demonstrates in stark relief that we must all strive to create a region where no country dominates and no country is dominated. Only through protecting countries' autonomies can we hope to keep the Indian Ocean that we see on this map, open, stable and prosperous. Australia is therefore proud to support world-class institutions like the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace in producing independent scholarship and providing those of us in government with new and fresh perspectives to consider. So thank you, and I commend the map and report from Carnegie to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your remarks. I'm going to pass the microphone now directly to Darshana, who's going to talk to us about the map.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Dr. Bull. Thank you, Minister Watts, for taking time and for coming to this event first between our two breakfast conflicts. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for being here this morning. It's wonderful to be back in Canberra. I'm back here. I haven't been back here since COVID, and there's perhaps nothing else I'd be doing on a jet-lagged morning than discuss Indian Ocean. So thank you very much for your time. Let me start by thanking the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade for support toward this map and the project, which highlights Australia's commitment and interest and commitment to the Indian Ocean, as the Minister also just raised. It's been wonderful to work with the DFAT team, and in particular with Nick Aids, if I don't see him here, but then hopefully he's somewhere here in the room. Let me also start by thanking the National Security College. Always a pleasure working with Professor Rory Metcalf and team, Dr. Bull, Will, and the NSC team for making this possible. The project and the map has been built over a period of approximately 14 months with Herculean amount of work to present a coherent and continuous data-driven map of the entire Indian Ocean. I'm not sure if I'm doing...
Folks are trying to sort it out.
Oh, okay. No worries. I hope it's not too distracting, but the map presents a coherent and continuous data-driven representation of the entire Indian Ocean, from the Red Sea and the eastern coast of Africa to the Indonesian Straits in Australia. While I have the distinct pleasure of standing before you on behalf of the Carnegie Endowment's Indian Ocean Initiative to present this project and the map, it is a collaborative work from my colleagues back in Washington, D.C., Nitya Lab, Jessica Greeley, Aislinn Familati, Tim Martin, Jocelyn Solly, and Lindsay Maislin. I will briefly present some of the key features and layers of the map. In total, we have built 11 interactive maps that build 11 individual interactive maps to understand the drivers of maritime security in the Indian Ocean region. I'll go through some of these layers to launch and present the map, and then I'll share some of the key features and perhaps some of the lessons that we learned from working with this data and collating and curating this Indian Ocean database for you today. The way we approached the project was to provide an innovative research tool that presents the Indian Ocean as one continuous maritime theater. The Indian Ocean Strategic Map combines data and expert analysis to foster greater understanding of the 21st century, developments, challenges, trends across the Indian Ocean. For decades, the Indian Ocean has been viewed through the continental silos of Middle East, Africa, and South Asia. But to understand the true strategic importance of the region today, it must be viewed as one continuous theater. The study of a maritime domain requires a maritime approach. This interactive map is designed to show the Indian Ocean's economic, political, military, and geographic features and how they interact with each other to create one continuous theater. As I mentioned, the Indian Ocean is a maritime theater spanning from the Red Sea to the western coast of Australia, including its choke points, island nations, and littorals. This map and the geography layer within the page identifies all littoral nations, and island territories who generate their own exclusive economic zones as per the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Each of the layers provide further details. For instance, users can click on any of the nations, any of the 33 nations that are around the Indian Ocean rim, and it will provide information on GDP, on population, on exclusive economic zone. The maritime boundaries marked are as per UNCLOS and provides an overview of the sheer size of maritime spaces, especially for island nations, highlighting the need for maritime domain awareness and in mitigating challenges such as drug smuggling and human trafficking. It includes both territorial waters and exclusive economic zones. The About the Map layer, a map phase, tells you the definitions of this as well. And the dispute layer maps ongoing territorial disputes across the Indian Ocean region, which is about 13 at this point in time. The map also identifies the key choke points in the area, and in the last phase, we did an overview of trade flow to provide a perspective of trade density through these choke points. This phase provides a more nuanced overview of that moment, and I will talk about that in a few minutes. Usually we hear about the Straits of Malacca because I believe because of the Malacca dilemma about the important choke point in the Indian Ocean region. But there are 3 other equally important choke points in the Indian Ocean region, and any disruptions around or across any of these choke points will not only impact trade movements within the Indian Ocean countries, but also between Europe, East Asia, Australia, and Africa. And when you interact with the map, it will highlight how the economic movements and the relevance of these choke points weave together to present and perhaps provide an urgency to look at the Indian Ocean as one region. One of the key aims of this map is to highlight the importance of perspective. Not everybody sees the world the same way. Maps do it better than any other research tool. Consistent with our idea of perceiving the Indian Ocean as one maritime theater, this project helps define different perspectives of the ocean with an aim to underlining every nation will have a different perspective of the Indian Ocean or its maritime domain based on its geography. We can click on the map and say we can click on Australia, which is represented both in 2D and 3D, and the map reorients to that subregion's perspective of the ocean, outlining the coasts that run through the Indian Ocean. This is a key component of understanding maritime geographies and identities. Similarly, the map reorients to highlight perspectives from South Asia, Middle East, Southeast Asia, and Africa. A unique advantage of looking at the Indian Ocean as one continuous maritime trade theater instead of dividing it between Eastern and Western Indian Ocean is that that this project has allowed us to map multiple different players, both as we term it within the project, as traditional players and emerging players. The Indian Ocean is home to many different players with different economies and varying degree of interest. The players, however, are changing, and the players have changed significantly since the end of the Cold War. We identify 11 nations as key players, 6 identified as traditional based on different metrics of geography, history, development partnerships, etc., and 5 emerging players. The traditional players are India, France, United States, Australia, United Kingdom, and Japan. And the 5 emerging players are Russia, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, UAE, and China. Breaking through the silo of continental division of the Indian Ocean has allowed us to truly understand the Indian Ocean as a maritime theater, as well as an opportunity to reorient our own mental maps of what constitutes the Indian Ocean region, to acknowledge, recognize, and study the role of actors in the eastern coast of Africa and the Middle East in the Indian Ocean, and what would their implications be, not just for the Indian Ocean, but the larger Indo-Pacific. The map is designed to provide information to the users as a research tool, and for that we have layers dedicated to understanding trade and economics, as well as military sales across the region. For example, the regional trade layer allows a user to click on any of the 33 countries on the map, which provides the data on the selected country's top import and export trading partners. For a more curated overview on the key players' trade engagements with the Indian Ocean region, you can select any of the 11 players from a drop-down list, and the map will highlight the players' import and export partners. This has allowed us to not only map the key trade partners for each of the Indian Ocean rim nations, but also to map trade movements within the Indian Ocean itself. This is perhaps the layer that took us the most amount of time in mapping. The economic section also depicts energy shipping across the Indian Ocean region. This layer alone took us, I believe, about 7.5 months to get it together. The most often cited fact about the Indian Ocean is that it is a key trading route. This layer depicts the movement of oil tankers carrying liquid energy across the Indian Ocean region in one calendar year. This layer represents the movement of liquid energy that transited the Indian Ocean in the year 2022. We had millions of raw data points that our cartographers mapped and created this layer. This data provides an overview of the year that can also be curated for movements in a particular month, which you can see at the bottom of it between times and months and days. The breakdown of the energy movement by days and months allows users to focus on specific events if need be. For example, this is the data this is the 2022 data, which means that if you want to see what happened to shipping movements when Suez Canal was blocked in early last year, you can curate this bar to focus on those days in March last year and see if there were any changes in its movement. The animation will also show movement through days and months, which carry closer details to users interested in studying movements and patterns of tankers across the Indian Ocean, which has its own relative significance for maritime crimes, pollution, and other maritime activities. The map can also filter based on specific days, months, and the size of the tanker, and you can zoom in to a particular area in the Indian Ocean region to really understand the density of traffic and the movement across those choke points. As Minister Watson mentioned, Australia does have the largest exclusive economic zone in the Indian Ocean region. This map provides an overview of the search and rescue zones, which carry its own significance when viewed against energy movements, choke points, and the general geography of the Indian Ocean. These zones are critical in search and rescue efforts, particularly since the Indian Ocean is prone to natural disaster. But when you truly look at the Indian Ocean region and understand it's against its choke points and trade movements, the search and rescue zones also highlight its importance and significance in navies and their ability to be present in these waters. Along with the search and rescue zones, our layers on multilateralism includes maps on regional institutions, information fusion centers, the search and rescue zones, and diplomatic missions. This provides the basis for regional collaboration to truly understand what are the regions, what are the forums, what are the groups that exist in the Indian Ocean region. It maps existing forums such as Indian Ocean Rim Association, Indian Ocean Tuna Commission, Indian Ocean Commission, Djibouti Code of Conduct, the Tsunami Warning Center, Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, among others. To truly create a coherent Indian Ocean database, we have also linked the website to regional forums, which can be accessed directly from the map, such as for IORA, when the website is available. Our diplomatic layer, which is not part of the presentation today because of a glitch in technological error, but our diplomatic layer visualizes our data on diplomatic footprint of the 11 key players across the Indian Ocean region. That data only reflects embassies or high commissions in the capital cities across the 33 nations in the Indian Ocean and does not consider honorary consulates or consulates in other cities. We did expect China to come out pretty strong in the diplomatic missions, but China's emerged as both the top trading partner in the region as well as the country with a diplomatic presence in each of the 33 countries in the Indian Ocean. Beijing is the only country that has a diplomatic footprint across the entire Indian Ocean region, including all 6 island nations. Similar to the economic layer, the military layer maps the movement of arms supplies in the Indian Ocean region. Like in the economic layer, you can select any of the key players to get a view of who the player sells or receives arms from within the Indian Ocean rim. Clicking on any of the Indian Ocean countries within the map itself will also provide an overview of the top arms supplier and recipient of the nation, regardless whether they fit in within the 11 players we have identified or not. Finally, on the landing page of the map, we also have the base map, which launches into a full map of its own and provides an overview of most of the data that has been embedded in the individual interactive maps. On the left side of the legend, there are all the layers which launch into their own interactive maps, but is also available to you in one place. The effort has been to study the Indian Ocean as one continuous theater, provide a better understanding of its geography, its trade, its military, its disputes, its diplomatic and regional frameworks. It serves to provide a coherent picture of the Indian Ocean and help policymakers and researchers better understand the drivers for maritime security, the challenges and opportunities in the Indian Ocean. Having created this database and mapped the region, which in itself was a monumental task because there is no existing Indian Ocean database that one can access to really understand what is going on. Having created this database, it allows for a deeper and a more nuanced aspect of issues in the Indian Ocean, and in future phases, hopefully more importance on issues such as illegal fishing or opportunities for other maritime collaborations. A better understanding of Indian Ocean also provides opportunities and scope for minilaterals in the region, such as I would say India, Australia, and France, or Quad, as the minister has identified. The map is now live online on the Carnegie website under the Indian Ocean Initiative, including the report. I welcome you and urge you to take a look at it, interact with it, and please let us know if you have any comments, suggestions, or feedbacks on it. Thank you very much. stay here.
there to
Yeah.
take some
Sure.
questions. Thank you very much, Darshana, for rearranging our mental maps here so compellingly this morning. We have about 10 or 15 minutes for question and answer. We have 2 roving microphones around the room, if anyone would like to ask our expert some questions. We have one down here with the red bow tie.
Darshana, thank you so much. David Andrews from the National Security College. I think it's a really great way of understanding these wider regional concepts, particularly when in often Australia's strategic rendering, our view of the Indo-Pacific will often stop at the western edge of India and doesn't stretch to Africa and the Middle East quite so much. So it's a great way of visualising that. Just quite a technical question. When you were looking at the arms transfer category, could you tell me a little bit more about how you, on what basis you determine arms? Is it against sort of the international codes by the sort of arms control treaties, or is it just any defence-related export? Is there? I'm sure this is probably in the explanatory material that I could see online subsequently, but as someone that used to work in defence export controls, I'm just intrigued as to the breakdown that way.
So the data is, so for most of the data we have basically curated. Let me also say that the report has an appendix on sort of how we've used the data and how we've curated. Like I mentioned, the biggest challenge in creating this map was collecting the data, because there is no Indian Ocean database. Even if we went to UN systems, there is no Indian Ocean database, so you have to go to multiple different systems and curate the list for us. So we've worked with only, of course, publicly available open access military databases, some subscription only. The military layer that we have, that we finally have on the map, because we went back and forth on many variations of it, is taken from the CIPRI database, because that is most widely accepted in terms of the military arms exchange between countries by volume of goods, and it was helpful for us to, or it allowed us it allowed us to calculate the import and export partners. So we curated the data from the CIPRI database that is already out there, and framed it within the Indian Ocean map, but also against the 11 key players. Because again, when we think of Indian Ocean, you don't necessarily think Turkey or Russia or UAE traditionally, but that is what we're trying to do, that curate that through it. So this is mostly in terms of the volume of arms exchange, general arms exchange between countries within the Indian Ocean region as per the CIPRI database. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony. The question here, and then we have one over here, and Anthony over on the left.
Hi Darshana, thanks so much for the presentation, and as a visual learner, I love this map, so congratulations to you and the team. I had 2 questions, but they're both quick. The first is, you've spoken about some of the players we don't often think about when we think about power in the Indian Ocean region. The player we do think about a lot is India, and I was wondering if you could reflect, based on the data points that you've collated, on what that looks like in the Indian Ocean region, so in India's role backed by data. Secondly, I know that this is a public resource, which is fantastic. I'd be interested to know if you're doing other launches or promotions of the map in Indian Ocean states or other key players.
Should I take one more question?
Do you want to take one more question? We have one here. You could just identify yourself.
Hi, thanks very much for that. What a fantastic map. My name's Alan Gamlin. I'm a professor in the School of Regulation and Global Governance at ANU and director of the Migration Hub at ANU. 2 quick questions. One is, who's your developer and can I hire them? Seriously, I would love to get their name. Second is, unsurprisingly, given my interests, movement of people, do you plan to get that data in? Do you need some help with it?
I'll come back to the question, but we always need help. You can see the map is a Herculean task. On players in India, I think the Indian Navy is perhaps one of the few navies that defines the entire Indian Ocean region and its area of interest, from the eastern coast of Africa to the western shores of Australia, of course, with priority areas with different priority areas identified in different sub-regions. India is a key player, whether you look at it from a diplomatic presence, whether you look at it from an economic presence point of view. It's more heavy on the Eastern Indian Ocean and Northern Indian Ocean, but also on the Persian Gulf, not as much perhaps on the eastern coast of Africa or, say, with Madagascar and Comoros as much as it's with Mauritius, Seychelles, Sri Lanka, and Maldives. But we identified the key players based on historical presence, United Kingdom, military presence, United States, development presence, Japan, geography, size, Australia, being search and rescue, net security provider, India. So there were different metrics on it, and I think India and Australia are two players that sort of come up in almost all of the metrics that we had. The other player that we don't think enough, I think in Delhi, people do think about this player. It's France. France is a pretty important player in the Indian Ocean region. India, France, and Australia are the only countries, and I believe South Africa, who has island territories in the Indian Ocean region. But in terms of size and presence, your physical presence will also equate to your diplomatic and political as well as military presence, and that stays between India, Australia, France. And I have written about this, I think, including for NSC on island territories and how it can provide for better collaborations between Andaman and Nicobar and Cocos Island. And the map will tell you where they are located, how close they are to each other, how much exclusive economic zones they generate. So this is an idea for future phases on how it will actually help countries to figure out the commonalities between different Indian Ocean nations and how that can translate to maritime security. On Indian Ocean region states presentations, we have some things planned virtually, but Indian Ocean is also very vast, and flying across takes a lot of time and funding. But in my own capacity, as I move through different conferences and engagements on Indian Ocean countries, I do plan to continue presenting this because, again, it's a new, we're trying to shift the way we're thinking about the Indian Ocean region. So I'll take every opportunity that I get to present this, and definitely look forward to connecting with IORA Secretary to be able to present this map and link it with some of their work. Our developers are international mapping. They're fantastic, and the cartographers are really good. Like I said, the energy shipping layer was, I think, we had about 3 million data points that had to be plotted individually to create these lines and movements, because what was available to us was basically the longitude and latitude at every time a shipping vessel has pinged. So I think we got about 3 million data points, and then that had to be mapped out, and it's a very heavy map. And then we had to figure out in a way that, how do we put it in a website where users don't get tired of waiting for the data to load, and how does it move? So that was the longest part of it. But thank you for asking that, because I think they deserve all the credit, and the cartographers deserve all of the patience, despite my constant nagging when is this going to be up and running. We have mapped population in this version of in this phase of the map of all the 33 countries, based and there's a population density map in the Indian Ocean strategic map. We haven't done the movement of people, but because, again, like I said, it's a question of data collection, and going into the project, I didn't know that this was going to take up all of our time, but I truly did not anticipate how fragmented Indian Ocean data actually is, and how necessary and urgent the level of urgency there is to create some sort of a database in there. And I do think this is the only database today that exists that will give you a complete picture of the Indian Ocean as it stands. And I have DFAT to thank for that.
Thanks, Dara. My mind is boggling at how you could deal with 3 million data points. Anyway, it's interesting though, because that's almost the easier part of the challenge. Picking up on your point, I think broadly, the challenge is we have this map that has the ability to change mindsets, but how do you actually use the map? And I guess that's an open question for our diplomats and policymakers in the room. How do you actually take this map, disseminate it, and use it to change the mindsets and the behaviours of states in the Indian Ocean region? We have several questions. We have 2 over here, and then we have one from High Commissioner down here, Jenny. So would you like to take 3 questions again? Yeah. Okay, so Anthony, David, High Commissioner.
Anthony Bergen from Strategic Analysis Australia and the National Security College. Congratulations, fantastic resource. I have one suggestion. Next month, the International Seabed Authority in Jamaica will consider the environmental rules for seabed mining. The Indian Ocean is absolutely critical to this incredibly exciting industry. Korea, India and China all have reserved areas in the Indian Ocean for polymetallic nodules and polymetallic sulfides. So my suggestion, given this is a live document, you add a map of seabed resources and the reserved areas for seabed mining in the Indian Ocean. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, Darshana. I have to congratulate you on a really fantastic project, and it's quite amazing what you've been able to produce from rightly you said, the absolute disparate sources of information. I don't want to add even further to the huge task that you've taken on, but this is just something you might want to consider. There's a lot of really interesting platforms that show fishing, both legal and illegal fishing movements across the region, derived from AIS data and various satellite overlays. And I'm not in any way suggesting that you take on the task of reproducing that, but you might want to consider adding a fishing page to your product which links into some of these platforms, because they really show some quite extraordinary information which you don't really get in text. But otherwise, a massive congratulations for this project.
Thank you, David.
And one more question from Her Excellency.
Thank you. It's a very short question, and of course, barring on the two questions that were asked just now, this is on the blue economy, and also the resources, as it was mentioned, the seabed, and also the other resources, mineral and others. So is that the subject, because that subject is also something very important, so are you sort of focusing on that issue? That's it.
Thank you. I'll start with your question, Excellency. So the report has a little bit more detail than what we've been able to visualize on the map. So we have a section on blue economy just to provide an overview of what that looks like in the Indian Ocean region. But combining all the three questions, all of these three aspects are meant to be for we are meant to build this in the next phase of it, and to see what that looks like in the Indian Ocean region. But for us, when we were conceptualizing this project, we realized that without creating the foundational layers of the map, it's going to be hard to get into some of the nuances of maritime security and blue economy and fishing. So we do absolutely plan to build that in the next phase of it. And as a true think tanker from Washington, let me also take this moment to maybe ask DFED to continue supporting this project. I think, yeah, those were sort of the questions right now.
Any further comments on?
No, absolutely on seabed, and so we tried on the fishing. This phase we attempted, but we tried to actually plot the data for fishing vessel, but then fishing was even more than energy shipping, and we tried to link it with research vessels to see patterns actually, right? Because are fishing vessels only there for fishing vessels? Are research vessels only there for research vessels? And what are its implications for movements in the Indian Ocean region? So that'll require a more dedicated layer to actually connect the implications of non-traditional security and traditional security, because for so long we've kept the two siloed and separate from each other. But I think we are beginning to see changes, and we are beginning to see the two areas merge. So we decided to do this as a separate project because it'll require that much of dedication and pouring through the different layers. But thank you for both these suggestions, absolutely.
Thanks, Darshana. We're almost up against time. Do we have any further questions? I have one for you because I can't help but put my NSC hat on, and of course a huge part of our remit is to connect research with policy. And I'd like to put you on the spot and ask you, what are your top 2 or 3 messages for Australia coming out of the findings of this MAP project? Simple question.
Not
You're
heavy.
to tell our policymakers about why this matters so much for Australia.
So again, this we have said it in the report. The 2 most traded commodities in the Indian Ocean is Saudi oil and Australian iron ore. So in terms of trade, I think Indian Ocean is really important, not just for within the Indian Ocean, but with Africa, with Middle East, and Europe. The second thing I want to draw attention to is, yes, we talk a lot about the Straits of Malacca and the Malacca dilemma. Let me see if I can go back to the choke points.
And we talk a lot about the Taiwan Straits as well.
Yes.
And potential disruptions to those sea lines.
So we talk about the Straits of Malacca because of course, the implications on Taiwan and because I think of the Malacca dilemma. But the reason there is the Malacca dilemma is that the way Beijing has framed it, that should there ever be any sort of a crisis around the Straits of Malacca, China will be cut off from its energy supplies, and rightly so. We calculated 80% of China's crude oil transits the Indian Ocean region. Out of the 10 top crude oil suppliers for China, 9 are in the Indian Ocean region. That's how important Indian Ocean is to China. But if the Strait of Hormuz and Strait of Bab el-Mandeb are not secured, there is no oil to transit the Straits of Malacca. So you can't look at it in silo of one versus the other. It is going to have an implication. So to really understand, and it's a policy decision whether you want to work on one aspect or the other, but to fully understand the implications and the movements of goods and energy across the Indian Ocean region, I think it's equally important to look at the other straits as well. And we've identified Mozambique Channel as a choke point. It's not a choke point in a traditional naval sense, but many navies consider it. Any blockade in the Suez Canal, that's the alternate route. So I think it's equally important. And finally, I would leave with one thing is the disputes layer was an interesting sort of a mapping of the region, because the dispute is essentially leftover of a lot of the traditional and historical presence in the Indian Ocean region. So all of the disputes in the Indian Ocean region are with traditional players, not with emerging players. So I think there is that narrative change as well, how countries in the Indian Ocean region are viewing the players of the Indian Ocean region. And I think that is an important narrative to understand if you want to talk about collaboration and cooperation amongst other countries, that not everybody sees the same perspective and narrative of the Indian Ocean that we've been hearing since the end of the Cold War era, because the Indian Ocean truly has changed since the end of the Cold War era. And I think when we talk about maritime security, there really is a need to better understand the ocean in its entirety and as it stands today, and I hope our map can help toward that goal.
I think it most certainly has. Thank you so much. Congratulations again on an incredible piece of work. We are up against time. We're free to continue to use this room for about the next 4 minutes until it's time to head off. Please enjoy the rest of your breakfast. But a huge round of applause for Darshana and her colleagues.